Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar presented by SESLOC on protecting yourself from scams and fraud. My name is Vincent Delgado. I'm the Education Outreach Manager here at SESLOC Credit Union. I wanted to take care of a few housekeeping items before we dive into our awesome topic that we have this afternoon. I'd like to ask our panelists, Kevin, Robert, Teresa, and myself, if you could quickly just turn on your cameras, the audience can put a face to the voice this afternoon as we do our introductions. Kevin, you want to start first, just quickly introducing yourself and a little bit about your role at SESLOC?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm the Vice President of IT here at the Credit Union. So my team is responsible for keeping our infrastructure secure here at the Credit Union. And yeah, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks for having us, Kevin. Or thanks for joining us, Kevin. Robert?
Hi, I'm Robert Yamasaki. I'm the Information Security Officer for SESLOC.
Great.
Thank you for joining.
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa, and I'm sorry I'm having some camera issues, but I'm the branch manager in San Luis Obispo. Some of you may have already met me. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here, Teresa. And we're excited. For those of you that attended last year's presentation on cybersecurity, we have a new little wrinkle adding Teresa in here, her being at the branch level. It's awesome for her to be able to provide some insight from the financial institution's role as it relates to scammers and protecting you and your finances. Again, my name is Vincent Delgado. I'm the Education Outreach Manager here at SESLOC Credit Union. A couple other housekeeping items, and we're not going to stay on camera the whole time. I just wanted to make sure that those in the audience were able to put a face to the voice and provide a sense of familiarity. We can be distracting, and I can talk with my hands, so I'll make sure that as we continue on with the webinar, our cameras are turned off. But really quickly, some other housekeeping items. We are recording today's presentation, which is awesome. So if you have to cut off early for any reason, a recording will be sent to you of the webinar a little bit later today. Also, we're sharing a ton of great information here this afternoon. So if there are some friends or family who could be interested in hearing about this information, please share the link to the recording. It's just going to be a YouTube link, so it's very easy to share. Because again, there's a lot of valuable information that we want to get out there. And again, it's super critical that we share this information with everybody. So again, please feel free to share that information. If you're joining us for the first time, we do these types of webinars every single month on a variety of different topics. So if you're new, welcome. We're glad that you're here. I see some familiar names in the attendee list. Thanks for joining. And again, we hope to see you at future webinars here in the coming months. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off. Panelists, you can do the same as well too. And we're going to go ahead and get started here on today's presentation. Again, October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So just today, I went to KSBY, was kind of scrolling some news articles, and two on the front page were related to scams and cybersecurity. One of which was a telephone scam where folks are pretending to be from the Paso Police Department. Another one was a scam out of Santa Barbara County where folks were getting blackmailed. A scammer would send a text message saying that they have access to your personal information and they want you to pay a ransom using this QR code. We're going to talk about what those scams are, what they look like in more detail, but I think it's important to share that every day we're dealing with these things. So we shouldn't really be focusing on protecting ourselves just in the month of October. It should be a year-round topic. So we're really happy to be able to have these conversations today. What you can expect, we're going to talk about understanding the landscape, what we're facing as it relates to cybersecurity. We're going to quickly go over what do these scammers want? What information are they trying to get from us? We're going to talk briefly about a few different scams that we're seeing that are more prevalent. We're going to go over, I think, 4 or 5 different scams and talk about them, understanding that there's a lot more than maybe just the 4 or 5 we're going to share, but these are common ones that we're all seeing, ways to maybe protect ourselves. We're going to talk about the financial institution's role. Teresa's going to have a lot to share as it relates to kind of what role SESLOC may play in kind of helping you protect your finances. And then lastly, and I hope that this is a bulk of the presentation, is we're going to open it up for Q&A. We know that there's a lot of things that you may be seeing or facing are being dealt with. And so we want you to be able to utilize, some of the experts that we have here as a sounding board. So feel free to ask any and all questions. There should be that chat box or that Q&A box, which for me, it's at the top of my screen. For you, it might be at the bottom, but feel free to utilize that throughout the webinar. Get those questions in there. I'm going to limit them during the presentation so that there's plenty of time to get to this information and then open it up again at the end for Q&A. Lastly, we'll have a slide for some resources if maybe you have fallen victim to a scam, or you're just tired of receiving them and you want to play your part in kind of helping get these people caught. There's some resources slide at the end which we'll go over as well too. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in here. Oops, I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. So understanding the landscape. In today's interconnected world, we're all on our phones, we're all on our laptops, obviously, we're all on our tablets. Scams and fraud have become increasingly prevalent and sophisticated. I mentioned just today, looking at KSBY, citing those two scams. I think with the advancement of artificial intelligence, and I hate to give credit to these scammers, but because it's such a lucrative business, they've gotten a lot smarter as well too. So it's very important that we stay very vigilant. The Federal Trade Commission data shows that consumers reported losing more than $10 billion with a B to fraud in 2023. The most reported scam category was imposter scams, which we'll talk about. Imposter scams, whether that's businesses, government impersonators, you name it. We're going to dive a little bit on imposter scams in a few slides. And today's conversation really is going to help provide some insights into the latest trends and practical tips to maybe protect yourself from falling victim to these threats.
Hey, Vincent.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I don't believe you're sharing your screen. Are you trying to share a presentation?
Yeah, it's not up there.
Nope.
I could see it.
Oh, and I must be special. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's okay. As long as
I see it now. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. So again, today's conversation, we're going to talk about some of those scams. We're going to talk about some red flags that you can keep an eye on to identify a scam, and then again talk about that financial institution's role. So let's talk a little bit about what these scammers want. It's simple. They want your personal information. They can get access to your name, your social security number, your date of birth, addresses, even social media information. They want to pry that information from you. Mobile banking credentials, bank account numbers, any benefits information. They want all of that. If they can gather this information, they can potentially get access to your finances. They can open up lines of credit in your name. The more information they get, the better. So you'll see a theme throughout the webinar today of some of the examples that we give for scams. It's all about prying that personal information from you. Kevin or Robert, do you have anything more to add on kind of what they're looking for or what these scammers want?
So for me, I think the bottom line is they're trying to gain access to your information to commit fraud for financial reasons. So either access your financial information and try to get your funds, or commit fraud and take it from another entity.
And I think the biggest thing, especially when I reference social media information as well too, the more that you're sharing, the more that they can kind of use information against you. So let's be very cautious of how much we are oversharing on social media. Kevin, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and actually, I was just about to mention that. What we're seeing in the wild now is the automation of taking your social media information and then turning that into a phishing email. So with generative AI, they can simply just look at public profiles and say, hey, I see that we have very similar interests, and I would like to connect with you we're seeing a lot in sales emails, but we're also seeing it in phishing emails as well. So it's very important to make sure that if you do have a public profile, you keep a lot of sensitive information suppressed from that. And if you do like to have social media accounts, make sure they're as private as possible.
Awesome. Great advice. So now that we know, again, kind of the lay of the land, the landscape as it relates to scams and fraud and cybersecurity, and we kind of know the information they want, The next probably 3 or 4 slides, we're going to talk about examples of scams and show some images of what these scams may look like. Kevin and Robert are really going to chime in over the next few slides, and they're also going to provide some tips on how to stay safe, or they're going to provide some tips on red flags. Like they're looking at an image and they're going to point out, hey, this is maybe a red flag for me. The second I see this, Kevin or Robert will say, hey, this is a scam, and they'll tell you what to look out for on those specific images. So I referenced imposter scams and how I said that's kind of the #1 most reported scam right now. It's being reported that it's costing people $2.7 billion in 2023 alone, and that's imposter scams. Imposter scams generally start with kind of an unsolicited, that being the keyword, phone call, text message, email, social media message, pretending to be from a trusted financial institution like the IRS, or again, your own financial institution, a bank or a credit union. There's a few different images here as examples. Kevin, Robert, I'll let you guys take it away if you want to talk a little bit more about imposter scams and dive a little bit deeper on these 3 images here, which are perfect examples of imposter scams.
Yeah, so one of the biggest identifying factors when I see a text message like this is just looking at what they're trying to accomplish. Seeing links that are embedded in text messages are my first red flag. That tells me that they're trying to redirect me to a website. And even if the link may say the company name or contain information that looks legitimate, I'm in the position now with text messages that I don't trust it at all. So it's best if you do get a text message like this that you really think may be a concern, to actually use a trusted phone number to contact your financial institution, or use a trusted app that you use for online banking, and then begin a secure message or secure chat with your financial institution.
Also, when you're looking at these messages, you also want to pay attention to the grammar and the misspelling that they could have. Basically, if you do get a message and there is a link and you end up clicking on it, I would recommend to reset your phone, because either they're trying to load the spyware onto your phone or trying to gain access to your information on your phone. If you notice, like the first one, it says it's from citibank.com. That could be spoof. It's easy to have an application to spoof to show that it's coming from like a legitimate company, or like today, Vincent mentioned Paso Robles Police Department. I know the IRS ones. There's so many, and they could be spoofed, and it looks legit. The best thing to do is, if you get something like this, is to ignore it. If you're not comfortable ignoring it, call Citibank. Don't use the information that you got from the text, but look it up on your credit card statement, or look it up on your financial statement, and call the institution and say, hey, did you send me a text? And they will tell you, no, they didn't send you the text.
And I think one other thing I want to mention, especially as it relates to grammar in some of these text messages, the 3rd image, it's on my right. I'm sure it's on your right as well too, but the one that says call and it lists the phone number, and then it says now space exclamation point 314 hashtag unusual activity on hashtag. Like that is not a professional communication that would come from any trusted institution that you're involved with, regardless if it's the IRS or your bank or your credit union. So that, again, is a perfect example of being a major, major red flag. Don't call that number. Don't engage in any conversation, especially the 3rd one on the right, sticking with that one. Who it's from, alerts.banking.activity/ like that, again, is just another red flag for this being a scam. So everything that Kevin and Robert mentioned is exactly true. And again, this one's very, very common. And it's not that they'll, give you a link like in this first text message from Citi. It's not limited to just that, or they want you to call this number. They may provide another link for you to download an app. And so I know, Kevin and Robert, I've chatted with you in the past. Can you share, you know, if you get a text message and it's prompting you to download another application, I'm obviously going to assume that's a big red flag as well too. Can you speak to that?
Yes, because some of the apps are like AnyDesk. I know hackers are using that app to take over your device. And then there's other apps that will install malware on your device so they could basically image or emulate what you're seeing on your phone on their phone. So my recommendation is not to install any apps on your phone that is not trusted.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I concur. The best place to look for apps like our SESLOC online banking app is through the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Those are trusted locations to download financial institution applications, not just SESLOC, but others as well. Many times apps are hosted on websites that are not legitimate. So it's always best to go to those trusted places to install rather than a link in a text message or possibly a link in an email going to an imposter website.
I got a question here, and it also came in on the chat as well too. I feel like you see it all the time, like on social media, or it'll go viral. What about like responding back to these cyber criminals or these scammers and like playing along with them, giving them fake information and kind of stringing them along? Is that something that's recommended, or you're just kind of playing with fire?
Exactly. If you want to play with fire, go right ahead. But I've always told my family and I've told my friends just end it, just delete the message.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah, I would agree with Kevin's statement. I would just ignore it, delete it. If you do respond back to them, I mean, I'm sure you're stopping them from trying to commit fraud on another user by tying up their time, but is it worth your time to, maybe give out some personal information on accidentally? It's probably not. So I would recommend just to delete the message as well.
Good point. Good point. I always see those, and I feel like one day I'm going to do that, but it's correct. I probably shouldn't be engaging in that. Let's talk about another scam here that's incredibly common. The grandparent scam. Again, similar to imposter. It's I guess classified as an imposter scam, but something that's very common. And it speaks to a few different things that we've already discussed. First, the imposter scam. Second, scammers kind of harvesting the information they find on your social media. So essentially what they'll do is someone's going to call or text message you or send you an email pretending to be one of your grandkids. And they're going to say, you're in jail, or you're stuck in a difficult situation and they need help from you via wire transfer, gift card, Bitcoin, you name it. They'll emphasize things like, please don't tell mom or dad, like this exact, this is kind of a cartoon dramatized image, but the content on there is exactly the language that these scammers are going to use. Kevin and Robert, anything you want to expand on further as it relates to this specific scam?
So I've seen this scam. What they usually try to do is try to call you during maybe right around bedtime or when you're sleeping, and then they wake you up so you're not fully alert. And then they pretend to be a grandson or a son or daughter. And there's two things you could do. The first thing is you could tell the person, "Let me call your parents," and hang up from them. That's a for sure way of not getting scammed, because then you contact their parents and then the parent says, "No, they're in bed." The second thing is, and Kevin mentioned it before in one of our webinar, is set up a code word with your family. Only something that you and the other person know. So if they are really in trouble, they could present that code word and that is them. And then if it's a scammer calls you and say, "Well, what's the code word?" And if they don't know it, then they're gonna hang up the minute you say that, or you could hang up on them.
Yeah, exactly. Fear and stress are going to be the two biggest assets that the fraudster is going to try to exploit. And a lot of times you have to think twice when that occurs. And just like Robert said, first option is to just hang up and go to a trusted line that you know is legitimate. The second is the code word option, which with my parents, I just said, hey, if I'm in trouble, I'm going to use something that only you and I know from my childhood, that is never going to be published online or never going to be available. And it's something simple like that 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 you can easily remember, your descendants can easily remember, and I think the combination of those two are going to be very effective as these get more real, I guess, or pretend to be real, with a bit of the ability to essentially just take a small amount of audio and be able to impersonate the voice of somebody. We've seen those kind of in a lab environment, not really exploited at a national level, but it's only a matter of time before technology allows that to be automated, and it can get very scary.
Definitely. Teresa, I actually kind of wanted to bring you in a little bit on this specific slide. So I know, unfortunately, obviously the grandparent scam, it preys on, folks that are grandparents, and some might be in the audience. But we know that like elder fraud is also a very, very common issue that not just SESLOC members are dealing with, but most folks are dealing with. Can you speak a little bit about how maybe at the branch level, how you handle, maybe grandparents or maybe some of our elder members that come in and, maybe they've been communicating with someone and they're looking to get a wire transfer, they're looking to withdraw, a larger sum of money. Can you speak a little bit about kind of the branch's role and the conversations you're having with those people at the branch level?
Oh gosh, sure. And unfortunately, this happens far too frequently. So when we see something or hear something that is not typical for the person in front of us, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to ask some questions. And sometimes we're digging a little bit deep, and typically we'll say, kind of brace yourself. Here comes some questions. We're going to ask what you're using the money for. We're going to ask, are you supposed to put it in a box? Are you supposed to put it in a kiosk? What have you been told to do? Put it in the mail. So I think the best thing we do is when we're having these interactions, a lot of times we'll take our members to a private place so that they don't feel any less discomfort. But I watch for body language and, does this seem normal for you? Are you stressed? Is there someone waiting for you? Do you have your cell phone out? So there are so many different things, but our first step to try to protect our members and to protect our credit union is to ask questions. So should something like this happen to you and you come in, you want to request this wire transfer, you want to request a large amount of cash, just know we are going to ask you a lot of questions, and it's for your own safety. We've been able to thwart so much fraud by doing this. So that's one thing, just be prepared for questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I know you and I have had conversations, before about how frequent it's happening. And so I know that, many folks, maybe it doesn't go as noticed, but we definitely appreciate the work that, of course, you and your staff and other frontline staff are doing to prevent this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Moving forward here, this is another common one. QR codes are kind of everywhere. So I gave the example at the very beginning, coming out of Santa Barbara, there's a blackmail scam that's happening. What the scam was doing was it would show a picture of your house in a text message, and then following that would say, we have all of your information, we have access to your accounts, we're going to blackmail you for some funds or ransom. Scan this QR code to transfer money. So that's incredibly scary. It's an example of a little bit of a QR code here. We use QR codes almost daily now, between at a restaurant scanning for the menu. If you're in downtown Slow and you're going to pay for parking, you scan. Sometimes you can scan a QR code, or even in downtown Paso, I think you can do the same. So it may be tough to differentiate between, what's an actual QR code and what I should be using versus, a scam. Kevin and Robert, do you want to talk a little bit more about the increase in malicious QR codes and maybe how they're presenting themselves?
And so I see a lot in where a person would receive a package and something they did not order. And then inside there's a card that says, find out who sent you this item and scan the QR code. And the minute you scan it, it's basically some type of malware that will take over your phone and trying to access every information you have on your phone. Also have seen where they place stickers over like the parking meters and other areas. So make sure if you do scan a QR code, make sure look at it, make sure it's just not a sticker on it instead of like a whole label. And just be cautious on what you're scanning, because again, you don't want to scan the wrong QR code and then they end up with all your information in your phone, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's gotten to a point now where you really can't trust any of these QR codes, especially right now with a lot of the politically charged advertisements out there. You may see this a lot over the next few months until the end of November. So yeah, just be aware that when you do scan these QR codes, they're essentially a hyperlink, like you would see on a computer. And it could take you other places that you may not intend to go, or again, imposter websites that pretend to be a website that may gather information. So unless it's a menu at a restaurant that you know is a trusted site and you can trust the person that's delivering it to you, I would be very careful, especially when you see these QR codes out in the public.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I feel like now more than ever, I'll see, and even something like in our neighborhood, I recently saw there was a flyer that was advertising like a dog walking service. And it had a short little blurb about who the person was that was offering up, a dog walking service, and there was a QR code on there. And I don't know if it's real or not, and there's a QR code, and for all I know, it's a neighborhood, kid that's wanting to generate a little extra income, and sure, that's awesome, that's great, but again, I don't know if that QR code is real or not. I don't know if this person is real or not, this flyer is real or not. So it's just in the best practice for me to keep it moving and not scan that QR code for fear that it's going to take me somewhere, or I'm going to be downloading something on my phone.
I'd like to say the other day we had one of our neighbors' kids came over and they were fundraising for Harlow School, and he had a little lanyard with a label and it had a QR code, and that's all he was carrying. He says, "Oh, you could scan this and find out what the fundraiser is for." And I know my neighbor, I know the little boy, but I was scared to scan it. I was like, wait a minute, am I really going to fall victim for a QR code? And then we called a friend that has a son that goes to the same school, and sure enough, that's the way they're doing fundraising now, is through a QR code. So again, like Kevin stated, you make sure it's from a trusted source, and I wouldn't scan anything randomly, especially if I got a package that someone sent me and I didn't order it.
And so to put a bow on a couple of comments that we've made is, and I said at the very beginning, these scammers are getting more advanced and they're getting more intelligent. They may know that schools or other folks are using QR codes more frequently, so they may prey on that because they know it's a common occurrence now in our daily life to scan a QR code. Kevin brought up a good point about the election. The election, which we have a slide on an election scams here in a slide or two, but they are capitalizing on things that are happening in our everyday life. The charity scams is another common one as well too. When we have big natural disasters like the hurricanes that just happened, and there's benefits that are popping up left and right. Click here or scan here to make a donation to the hurricane recovery. It's another example of scammers see that. Scammers know it's common. They're going to prop up some fake websites to be able to capitalize on people's vulnerabilities or fear or some of the other emotions Kevin had mentioned as well too. So Robert's plan: call a neighbor, call somebody else to verify if it is factually true. Doesn't mean you still have to go through with it, but at least you're confirming whether it's real or not. Unusual activity scam, again, very similar to kind of that imposter scam. But what happens is you're using any of the other devices that you use, be it PayPal or be it Microsoft, and there's something that pops up on your screen or a notification that pops up, and it says we've noticed some unusual activity or someone recently tried to sign in using your account. The PayPal example here on the right, your PayPal account has been temporarily restricted. And I'll let Kevin and Robert, and especially use these two images as an examples of kind of what to look out for, because normally when you get an unusual activity alert, you want to act on it. However, you want to make sure you're doing a little bit of due diligence to make sure that this isn't a scam itself. So I see a couple of things already on these two images that I can see which would make it be fake. Kevin and Robert, do you want to chime in on either of these two?
So if you look at the first image, the domain name is incorrect. If it's coming from Microsoft, it's going to say Microsoft.com. It's not going to be something else. Or you got to be careful with who the domain name, because it could also be like mail.microsoft.com. And when it has an extra dot, or if it has an extra letter or word, that should be a red flag. That should be, hey, that does not look correct. Also the PayPal, I get probably, I'm going to say roughly 5 emails a day on scamming, and on my personal emails. And I look at it this way: anybody that's trying to call me, text me, or email me that I didn't solicit, they're like strangers to me. That's the way I'm going to treat them. And I'm not going to respond to PayPal. I'm not going to respond to Microsoft. I will go on to the site itself and make sure there's no messages. Because if it's a legitimate message, if you log onto your site, you should have some secure message, some type of alerting that will inform you about the message. But if you don't see anything on there, you could also call their phone number that's listed on their sites, not on these emails or these messages, but look it up, look in your statements again, call that number and say, did you send me this email, or did you send me this text? And verify, do the due diligence. I mean, I think this slide that Vincent put together is great because it talks about the urgency, panic, and confusion. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get you at a point where you're not thinking all the way through, what is this going to be, a spam or scam, or are they just, is this legitimate? Because they're trying to say, you got to do it now. You have to click on this link right now. And then, I've even heard where they even threat the end user of making them trying to click on the link or open an attachment.
Yeah, and actually, when you're doing these investigations to determine if this is legitimate or not, if you look at the example for the PayPal, you'll notice that the URL looks unusual, but you also see that little triangle with the exclamation point. So many of these companies, including SESLOC, have what's called certificate authorities or trusted certificate authorities. So what that allows us to do is work with a third party to confirm that when you are going to SESLOC's website, you are actually going to a website that is owned by the organization. If you were to click that triangle or click on that link at the top, or not the link, I'm sorry, the URL at the top, it should provide some information on why that triangle exists or why there might be a problem with that trust. And that's one good way of determining, okay, is this a legitimate server or not, that may have been placed in the middle between this email and the connection. So whenever I see that triangle, whether it's a yellow or a red, or you see, this site, it may not be safe, take those seriously, because that could be an indication that, especially if you're in a public Wi-Fi area, that they might be trying to put a server in the middle to obtain that information. And like Robert said, if you really are concerned about some unusual activity, it's best to go to that trusted site or that trusted app, or just contacting the financial institution and just verifying that your account is in good standing. I think that is the safest way, rather than attempting to determine if this is a legitimate email or a legitimate website and then potentially clicking a link that is going to a scammer.
I'd like to add in this one as
okay.
well, if
Go
you
ahead,
don't
Teresa.
mind.
I
If
was
you
gonna say I want you to chime in on this because I feel like you have a couple good things to say.
Yeah. Yeah. If you get something like this, whether you're getting an email, text message, whatever it may be, and you are unsure, literally don't open it, don't expand on it, don't click on any links. You are more than welcome to come into the branch and show any of us that work here the suspicious email or text or whatever it may be alert. And we'll help you to determine also whether it is, whether it looks to be valid or whether we see these all the time. So in most cases, we're able to say that's absolutely a scam. Just go ahead and delete that. And that's what's really important is delete that before you consider. A lot of times I think people want to open it and expand on it. For example, I got a message earlier this week that said my account at a specific bank had been compromised. I don't have an account at that specific bank. So I know well enough to just go ahead and delete that. Don't try to open it. I think what they expect is going to happen is it's going to startle people into going, oh my gosh, did someone open an account in my name at this other financial institution? That's what they're hoping you'll do. They're just fishing for information. So if you get something like that, stating your account at whatever bank is compromised and you don't have an account there, delete that. You get something that says we are unable to deliver your UPS package, and it's coming from, you can read the sender is like jessica@gmail.com or something. That's not coming from USPS or UPS or anything like that. Just go ahead and delete that. Don't click on anything. Walk on into the branch. You can walk in the branch, you know who you're dealing with, you see our name tags. So we're safe. Show it to us and we'll let you know.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the biggest reasons is I wanted to pull you in at least to wrap out this slide, Teresa, is that last point right there. Walk into the branch, call the call center. If you're unsure, just reach out directly and get that clarification, regardless of kind of where you are in that part of town. Pop into a SESLOC branch and just get that peace of mind before acting on anything that you receive. So again, thank you, Teresa, for echoing that. One of the last things I want to talk about here, Kevin had kind of mentioned it, and so did I as well too. Obviously hard to ignore the polarizing election that we have coming up, and scammers are preying on this as well too. There are a lot of scams that have popped up because of this election. Here are 3 examples. There are robocalls topping the list of reported scam attempts. And they're just, again, they're calling to pry and get some information. There's the political donation scam. I mentioned charity scams and how they prey on folks when there's a big natural disaster. And it's the same thing during a big election year. I feel like I'm getting a ton of emails or text messages as well too about making donations, and it's tough to figure out what's real and what's not real. So be very, very cautious, when clicking on these links or moving forward with making a donation. And then there's the fake polls and surveys. Polls and surveys are a big thing during election season. And so, many folks may get a phone call from a scammer who's pretending to be, on a campaign trail or whatever, and asking specific questions. And they may start going into asking personal questions to get that identifying information. So as with, everything Kevin and Robert have mentioned, if it's unsolicited, if they're asking unique questions that maybe don't relate at all to the reason of the call, if the link looks scary or it looks unsecure, again, it's best just to hang up, to ignore, to delete, and not even move forward with clicking on anything. I don't know if Kevin or Robert, you have anything more to add on this?
Just be aware of surveys. I mean, some surveys, they will keep asking you personal questions. As it may start off simple, like what's your favorite color, and then they'll be asking you what's your name, and then they'll be asking like where do you bank at, and then it just will go on, and that's how they capture your information, and they could use that to commit fraud against you or someone else.
Yeah, I can't wait for election season to be over, honestly. Yeah, and it goes beyond elections as well. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. So, as I feel like I'm a broken record, but when you do get that message that says, hey, you might have something available, we've seen this with lottery scams as well. Be very careful. Go to that trusted point that or to that person to have it evaluated just to make sure that it's legitimate or not. And then, but you should go under the assumption that anything you may receive is most likely not legitimate unless you can prove otherwise.
There's one last thing two last things I want to talk about, and then the next slide we'll have Teresa explain a little bit more on the financial institution's role. But I do want to speak a little bit about a data breach versus kind of an imposter, because oftentimes, we've mentioned a couple different names or accounts here, whether it's UPS and you get that text message saying the package was lost in transit, or I'll get a notification, or we saw PayPal, for example. And I'll allow Kevin and Robert to expand a little bit on the difference between a true legit data breach where a company's data has been accessed and it has been compromised versus an imposter pretending to be from that specific company. We see it over the last few years. Dell just had a big one in May of 2024. Ticketmaster, I think, was a huge one here in May of 2024, where email data and names and addresses were compromised, and even payment information. And other companies have had bigger data breaches in the past, and that's totally different than an imposter who is pretending to be from, say, SESLOC, for example. So Kevin and Robert, do you want to expand a little bit more on the big difference between a data breach and kind of an imposter? And maybe if you, like, for example, maybe we've all bought something from Ticketmaster, what to do in this case if a company that you frequently do business with had a data breach?
So a data breach is a company that had a security incident. And it could be from anything that basically downloaded some spyware, malware, took over their systems. There's so many scenarios. And, we've seen it with MGM, we've seen it with AT&T, we've seen it with Verizon, where they end up going into the company's data and stealing it. And usually they will say to the company, if you want it back, you have to pay this amount. And if they don't pay, it goes on the dark web. I've got quite a few letters from different companies like AT&T stating that my data was breached. They give me 1 free year of credit monitoring. And I do sign up for it because I feel, I'll keep an eye on things just to make sure. And those are data breaches. What imposter does is it's an individual person and pretending to be someone else to trying to trick you into getting your data or your funds. And it's not, if you get a text message that says SESLOC, something's wrong with your account, that's an imposter, and it's not really SESLOC systems are being infected, but it is someone pretending to be from SESLOC and trying to gain information or your funds.
Yeah, and to continue with that, when we think of data breaches, we think of data breaches occurring at companies or organizations that I have a relationship with. But what we're finding is these data breaches can occur from other organizations that you may not have a direct relationship with. One that comes to mind recently was the data breach of National Public Data. National Public Data was a background check company that essentially provided background check services to many organizations. But they decided they were going to essentially sweep the internet of information such as social security numbers. And it turns out that breaches could be in the range of hundreds of millions to possibly billions of data points from people that they didn't even have a relationship with. So you need to take that in consideration that the most likely, such as your social security number, most likely is already out on the internet, and there's nothing you could have done to prevent it. There's nothing that you could have done to stop it. But you should assume that those very sensitive pieces of information are public, and you will get mailings from companies that you have relationships with that may have suffered a data breach. But yeah, you have to take it in consideration that it's not your fault when these things occur. And it may not be with an organization that you had a relationship with.
That's a good point, because I know if you do get a letter and they do offer you free credit checking for a year, I would recommend to sign up, because it's going to help you in the long run, where you don't have to continue to monitor your own data. I mean, it's good to monitor your data, but if you find out that your information was a breach, I mean, it's nice to have help to make sure that no one is using your data.
All right, I want to get to this one last slide here, and I'll pull Teresa in. She alluded to a couple of these points a little bit earlier in the webinar, but I think it's worth it to kind of repeat or echo some of the things that you've already mentioned, Teresa. As kind of the financial institution's role when it comes to protecting our members from scams or fraud prevention and things of that nature. Yeah, again, the floor is yours, Teresa.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, in most cases, what we're seeing is we have, members coming in asking for, again, those wire transfers or larger amounts of cash. And I think the one most important piece to take from this is they're going to, if you're being instructed to do this, whether you're being threatened, whether they're trying, and I know we've already touched on this, sometimes it's based on fear, sometimes it's based on, putting you in a stressful situation. Maybe they're representing themselves as the IRS or as the sheriff's department, saying you missed a jury duty and we're going to arrest you, whatever it may be. Or whether they're literally just telling you, you need to go into the financial institution and I want you to tell them this story. And so they're actually feeding you a lie to tell when you come in, I'm building a fence and this is my half of the neighbors, whatever it may be. I have a family member who's on Medi-Cal and they can't receive cash and I'm going to help pay bills. So or they can only receive cash because they'll lose their benefits. Whatever the lie is something to be really cognizant of is if it starts with a lie, it's never going to be a good thing. So when you come in, if this happens to you, or if you know anybody who does this or is considering doing this, be completely honest with the financial institution. Sometimes they're on the phone listening. If they say, don't set your phone down, don't turn your phone off, I want to hear you through the entire transaction. That's all bad. Honestly, I can tell you if somebody were to call me and ask me to go to the bank and get a large amount of cash, I would drive directly to the police department and hand them my phone and say, I have this person on the phone with me. But that said, when we ask you the questions, be honest, let us know, and don't be embarrassed by it. We're not seeing any one demographic. We're not seeing any one type of person who's falling for this or who's being victimized by this. There is no target audience from what we're seeing in the branch. It's literally everybody. When the thieves are going out, they're going for everybody, taking those wet noodles, throwing them at the wall and seeing what sticks. So be honest when we're asking you the questions. If they're telling you to feed us a lie, obviously that's a terrible thing. Another thing is when you're getting these calls or text messages, it's really important to block that contact. And if you want to learn how to block it, gosh, you can come in and see me and I'm glad to help you learn how to block these phone numbers and text messages. We've had folks in the branch where they're being threatened to get the cash. And as we're blocking phone numbers, they start calling from all different states. So they're just pinging right in as much as they frequently can. And we're just blocking. So I think just being aware, and I want to say it might have been Kevin who said, just don't trust it. Even if you know the name, like they just suggested, maybe you might get a text message from SESLOC. That doesn't mean it's SESLOC. The criminals, unfortunately, have gotten a whole lot smarter. They are not using their powers for good. They're using them to do evil things and to steal. So I'm really hesitant to believe anything that I receive. So whenever I receive something, if I find it to be interesting or I find it to be something that I want to know more about, I delete that, and then I'll actually go and Google an actual website for it, or I'll log into those specific individual accounts that I have, but I'll never open those items. So one, be honest. When we're asking you the questions, we're only looking out for you. Two, don't be embarrassed. If you think that you might be being victimized in any way, shape, or form, it's not a question as to anyone's capability. It's literally happening to everyone. So just let us know, and we're glad to help you through it. What we don't want to see happen is, we're fed a story and eventually we give you your cash, and then you come back a couple days later and say, golly gee, it was a scam. And there's literally nothing we can do. Once you willingly enter into something and you hand that cash out or you send that wire, it's gone, never to return. So that's the last thing we want to see happen. So when you come in and we ask you those questions, it's because we truly care.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Robert, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I think Teresa hit the nail on the head, where that's a big red flag, is when the scammer's telling you to keep your phone on, let me listen to all your transaction. I mean, if anyone asks you to keep your phone on and go to your financial institution and withdraw money, that should be the biggest red flag ever. I mean, right then and there, you should say, this is a scam, and then hang up on them. So good point, Teresa. Thank you.
All righty. So now I want to make sure we've already got some questions that have popped up here in the Q&A box. We've got about, I'd say nine minutes left. And again, I want to be respectful of Teresa, Robert, and Kevin's time here. So please feel free to get these questions in. We've got a few that have already popped up. One question here, and again, Kevin, Robert, Teresa, whoever, feel free to chime in with these. Have you ever had any experience with deleteme.com? They search the internet for your personal information and delete it. Of course, it's for a fee.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing business concept. Reminds me of when you had these companies that would handle identity theft protection, and they would do their best, like LifeLock, I think it was a company similar in nature. I personally have not used this company, so I can't endorse it. But it is intriguing. It kind of automates the process of what you can do yourself with these companies like Facebook, Google, and I guess it makes it as a service. I would continue to do research, but unfortunately, no, I have not used the service, and I don't know anyone that has used it. But it is I think we will see more companies like this in the future.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to keep this resources slide up here as we continue to go through some of the Q&A portion. And this question here, since I have the 3 big credit reported agencies locked, am I safe from someone trying to open an account in my name? Is there something further I should do? So I don't mind quickly kind of answering this, and then if others want to chime in, they can. So yes, when you mean by, you have them locked, I'm assuming you mean you have the credit freeze on there, which is the second bullet point. It's an awesome resource. All 3 of the credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, offer a service where you can freeze your credit. What that does is it prevents anyone from being able to open up, lines of credit or take out a loan or anything using your information. It gives you massive peace of mind so that in case if your information does get out there, at least in terms of kind of your credit and them opening up loans or taking out loans or opening up credit cards in your name, it prevents them from being able to do that and kind of tank your score. So that's one really good resource out there. I'm not going to sit here and say you're 100% safe, because someone could still get access to, your login information through any of these other scams that we've shared. However, freezing your credit is one great resource or one great step or hurdle you can have in place to prevent some major damage. So yes, I would recommend most everyone should probably be doing that. The one thing I want to make sure is if you yourself, maybe you've frozen your credit at the 3 bureaus, and you're going to go buy a car this weekend or next weekend or whatever, you have to make sure you unfreeze your credit in order to do that. So you can kind of freeze and unfreeze them as frequent as you want. And it's I think a couple minute process to do that, but it is a really good resource, and it really does give you kind of that peace of mind, and it makes you I guess sleep a little easier at night. Again, some of these other scams, you don't have immunity to them for other reasons, but it really is a good resource. Over my phone's text message, I often get "Hi!" or "How have you been?" or "What's new?" And I'm assuming when you ask this question, it's not from messages that I would assume. Robert, Kevin, any comments? I mean, I kind of feel like that's definitely a phishing scam, but anything you want to expand further on that?
Absolutely. That's what I call a proof of life. They're just seeing if you're actually going to respond, and then they continue from there. You get that a lot when you have like a massive list of phone numbers, in the hundreds of thousands. Sending a text message costs a spammer less than a penny to do. So it's very cost effective to send a massive amount of text messages and try to get a bite. If I get a bite, then I might have more incentive to continue that conversation and then attempt to scam. So yeah, when you ever get those messages, just delete it. Or just say, or I mean, actually, no, I used to say, who is this? And if it's nobody I know, then delete it. But these days, I would just delete that message. If somebody really wants to talk to you, they'll know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
I agree with Kevin. If you do get these types of messages, just delete it. If you notice that you're getting the same repeated number over and over and over, you can set your setting to block that number from coming in. But the most important thing is don't respond to them. That's what they're looking for. They want you to respond, so then this way they can make sure they got the hook and line basically into you. So delete the messages, ignore them, and they will go away.
There's another one here, and it kind of seems in line with the text message version, but it just says, "What about phone calls from an unknown number and no one is on that number even if I answer it?" It sounds like Kevin, you had mentioned it's like a proof of life kind of thing. They're just phishing, and maybe someone will bite, or
Exactly. And you kind of at the end mentioned, there's nobody on the other line. You'll see with a lot of these spammers and callers, they're using a call center from halfway across the world. So it takes about 5 or 10 seconds to actually connect a person from that call center to respond. So when you see those long delays or you see a choppy reception, that's usually a good sign that this is not a one-on-one conversation with someone direct that's local. Yeah, I would immediately just delete the call or ignore it.
I'm going to jump in on that one too. I'm going to tell you for myself personally, I won't answer a phone number that I don't know, because I do fear that voice stamp, using artificial intelligence to gather the tone of my voice, the influx, and then maybe use that against a loved one later. So for me, no, you're not even going to get a hello from me.
Nice. I have my Facebook account stolen. The new owner is using my name and image to sell crypto. Any way to defeat this? Facebook is unresponsive.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's, working with Facebook when I was doing some work for a political campaign. It's amazing that a Fortune 500 company doesn't have a call center or doesn't have a direct way to communicate with them. It was extremely difficult. I actually had to use a back channel to get something that I needed done quickly. I really can't. Not sure how you can stop that beyond just what's provided from Facebook. And yes, it may take a very long time. Best thing I would do is just communicate with your friends and family and say, hey, this isn't me. You're going to see these imposters, and they love to use uh, uh, victims that are of an older generation, baby boomers and so on, just because they know it's going to be effective. So yeah, I would just do my best to communicate with all your friends and family and say, hey, this isn't me, as well as try to work directly with Facebook to resolve it. But unfortunately, Facebook and a lot of these other social media companies, this isn't a priority for them, in my opinion. So I'm sorry about that.
There's another question here, and I think, both Kevin and Robert and even Teresa can chime in on this. The debit cards now that have the tap to pay versus, using the chip or swipe. Can you speak to, the reason as why someone would want to go more towards tap to pay versus the inserting the chip and swipe? And I know SESLOC now we have ability to do tap to pay. And I know it was touched on earlier, but let's just echo, the importance of maybe using tap to pay, and Teresa, how they might be able to get the new tap to pay card.
So I prefer tap to pay. The reason why is because skimmers can be put into those card readers. And it could happen at a grocery store, it could happen at a gas station, even an ATM. And if you tap and pay or you tap it, that's less likely they will try to get your information. Also, remember, whenever you have to put in your PIN number, it's best to cover it up. Make sure when you're putting in your PIN number, no one could see it, not even if they had a camera on that PIN pad. You want to make sure it's covered so that your PIN number stays secret.
And I agree with that. Just the ease of transaction, not having to insert your card into a potentially, altered device, maybe at a gas station pump or something. I much prefer to tap it and know that I'm reducing that risk.
Can you, Teresa, talk about how SESLOC members can get the tap to pay card?
Absolutely. You can come into a branch or you can call our contact center. So either way, it's easy. We're able to replace the card that you currently have. In most cases, there are some exceptions. But if you have a newer card and it doesn't have the tap, a lot of times we're able to just reissue that exact same card number in the branch that now has a tap.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
It looks like that's it for questions, which is about perfect timing since we're at 101. Again, really quick thank you to Kevin, Robert, and Teresa for joining us this afternoon. A ton of great information. At the very beginning, we shared contact information. I'll pull that. Sorry, I'm going to move really fast here. I'll pull that slide up again in case folks want to send an email, follow up, reach out. Sorry, I know it's going so fast. Send any of us an email if you'd like. Happy to answer any questions that you do have. Pop into the branch, as Teresa mentioned. Happy to help answer any questions there as well too. Really appreciate everybody joining. Thank you for being such a great and engaging audience. Keep an eye out for a webinar next month. We'll have that posted here shortly. We also have a long-term care seminar coming up. So for folks in the audience that have some questions about long-term care, we do have that in-person presentation happening here at the SLO branch next month. So again, check our website or our social for more information about that. But again, thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Kevin, Robert, and Teresa, and everybody stay safe out there and have a good rest of your week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.